Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet refusal to react when everything pushes you to explode, defend yourself, or prove something. The truth is simple. The person who controls their reactions controls the direction of their life. The person who doesn't is carried by impulses, emotions, and other people's expectations. Your reactions build your identity, shape your reputation, and influence the opportunities that come toward you or away from you. Every day you are tested. It might be a rude comment, a disagreement, a moment of disrespect, a financial setback, or a situation that pokes at your insecurities. Those moments decide who you are becoming. Most people think life changes through big victories, but life often changes through small moments, when you choose discipline over impulse, patience over aggression, silence over chaos, and strategy over ego. In this audiobook, we will explore the power of response. Not the automatic reaction, but the chosen response that increases your influence, respect, and outcomes. You will learn how to remain calm in conflict, how to resist provocation, how to starve drama, how to regulate your emotions, how to stop seeking validation, and how to let your results speak louder than explanations. In other words, how to become unrecognizable to the old version of yourself. If you apply the principles inside these chapters, people won't just notice improvement, they will be unable to recognize the former version of you. This transformation begins with a single decision. You will no longer throw away your power for short-term reactions. In this audiobook, we will practice the art of controlling your reactions so that your life is dictated by choice, not emotion. The more control you hold, the more respect you earn, from others and from yourself. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Stop letting others control your buttons. There are people, situations and environments that are always trying to reach for your buttons. They poke, prod, provoke, and test you. Sometimes they do it intentionally, sometimes they do it accidentally, but the result is the same. If you react automatically, they gain control. Maybe not control over your entire life, but control over the moment, control over your emotions, and control over the direction of your day. And that's not a small thing. If someone can control your reactions today, they can influence your decisions tomorrow. Think about how often your mood changes because of someone else's comment, tone, attitude, or behavior. A simple sentence can ruin someone's entire afternoon. A single criticism can make a person give up on a goal they were excited about. A small disagreement can turn into an overreaction that damages relationships for months, all because someone touched a button that wasn't protected. The goal of this chapter is to help you protect your buttons and ultimately reclaim control over your reactions. You need to become aware of two kinds of control: the control others try to have over you, and the control you allow them to have. Many people are not aware of the second one, but it matters even more. You cannot stop the world from trying to influence you. You cannot make life gentle, predictable, or fair, but you can train yourself not to hand out access to your emotional system. That's where real strength begins. There's a concept worth remembering: provocation only works on the untrained. Someone can provoke you, disrespect you, or underestimate you, but you choose whether to respond impulsively or strategically. You choose whether to react with ego or with intention. You choose whether to give them power or keep it for yourself. That choice is always there, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. And the more you practice, the easier that choice becomes. One of the greatest traps people fall into is overreacting to things that don't deserve their energy. Not everything needs to be answered. Not everything needs to be confronted. Not every battle is worth fighting. The real question is, does reacting serve you? Does it help you? Does it move you closer to your goals? If the answer is no, then the reaction is not power, it's weakness disguised as strength. Impulse always feels strong in the moment, but it rarely produces strong results. When you stop letting others control your buttons, something interesting happens. People start adjusting their approach. They stop using the same tricks. They lose the ability to manipulate your emotions. They realize you are no longer easy to trigger, and that creates a shift in how you are treated. People respect those they cannot easily influence. They respect those who think before they react. They respect those who can take an attack without falling apart, and take an insult without losing their composure. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become selective. You respond instead of react. You choose your battles instead of fighting everyone that appears. You learn to ask yourself a simple but powerful question: is this worth my energy? And most of the time the answer will be no. That is growth. That is maturity. That is the beginning of becoming unrecognizable to the old you. Control begins with awareness. Awareness becomes practice. Practice becomes strength. And strength eventually becomes identity. That is how you take back your buttons. That is how you stop letting others direct the course of your day. That is how you move from emotional dependency to emotional leadership. Chapter 2. Feel the emotion, don't obey it. Every reaction begins with a feeling. Something happens, your body registers it, and you feel a spark of emotion. Maybe it's irritation, maybe it's insecurity, maybe it's fear, excitement, jealousy, or even pride. The feeling appears fast, and most people assume that once the feeling shows up, the reaction must follow. Emotion, reaction. That's the default sequence. But that sequence is not a law, it's just a habit. A habit you picked up long before you realized it was shaping your life. One of the most powerful skills you will ever develop is the ability to feel without obeying. To feel the emotion but refuse to be driven by it. To watch it rise, pause and ask, what is this feeling trying to get me to do right now? That single moment of questioning separates the impulsive person from the intentional person. It is the difference between reacting to life and directing life. Most people don't struggle because they feel too much. They struggle because they obey too quickly. They feel offended, so they retaliate. They feel anxious, so they avoid. They feel jealous, so they compare. They feel insecure, so they hide. They feel challenged, so they escalate. The emotion fires first, and the reaction follows without review. That is how people create unnecessary conflict, how they damage opportunities, and how they sabotage their own progress. Not because life is cruel, but because they have never learned to interrupt the automatic obedience between emotion and action. So here's a principle worth remembering. Emotions are signals, not commands. Signals offer information. They tell you something is happening inside you, but they do not decide what you must do next. Anger might be telling you a boundary was crossed. Fear might be telling you something unfamiliar is ahead. Jealousy might be telling you what you value. Insecurity might be telling you that your identity needs development. Emotions are messengers. Do not shoot the messenger. Do not worship the messenger. Listen, learn, and then choose your response. This is where emotional maturity is built. Emotional maturity is not the absence of emotion, it is the control of obedience. You can be angry and not explode. You can be afraid and still move forward. You can feel jealousy without attacking someone. You can feel disrespected and still respond with dignity. That is real power. The people you admire in history, leadership, business, or life are often not the ones who never felt emotion. They are the ones who didn't let emotion drive the car. There is a myth that strong people are unfeeling. That is not true. Strong people feel deeply. Strong people feel intensely. But strength means you don't let the first feeling become the final decision. If you obey every emotion that appears, you are not in control. Your impulses are. And impulses don't think about consequences. Impulses don't think about reputation. Impulses don't think about growth. They just want immediate relief. Relief from discomfort. relief from uncertainty, relief from vulnerability, and relief is rarely aligned with progress. To master this skill, you don't need to kill emotion. You need to create distance from it. A small space between what you feel and what you do. A space measured in seconds, sometimes even in deep breaths. That space is where your life changes. That space is where you decide, not obey, and that space is the birthplace of wisdom. Every wise person you know has learned how to pause long enough to let emotion cool and logic rise. Not because logic is always superior, but because logic considers consequences and value. Emotion considers immediacy and survival. Here's the beautiful part. The more you practice feeling without obeying, the more confident you become in your ability to handle life. And with confidence comes calm, and with calm comes influence, and with influence comes respect. People trust those who can stay composed. People follow those who don't fold at discomfort. People look up to those who don't overreact to every spark of emotion. That trust becomes an asset. A quiet advantage, a powerful form of leadership, both over yourself and in the eyes of others. None of this means suppressing emotion. Suppression leads to explosions later. Suppression is pretending you don't feel anything while your internal world burns. That is not control. That is denial. Control means acknowledging the feeling and then choosing the response deliberately. You can say, "I feel angry," without acting in anger. You can say, "I feel afraid," without obeying fear. You can say, "I feel disrespected," without seeking revenge. And when you do that consistently, you build emotional discipline. And emotional discipline is the foundation of becoming unrecognizable to who you used to be. The old version of you reacted quickly. The new version reacts deliberately. The old version chased relief. The new version chooses results. And the bridge between those two versions is the simple, powerful skill of feeling the emotion, but refusing to obey it blindly. That is how self-control begins. That is how identity evolves. That is how you start to live on your terms, not under the orders of whatever emotion shows up. Chapter 3. Build the pause before you respond. The most powerful moment in any reaction is not the reaction itself. It's the tiny pause that comes before it. That pause is where your life is decided. It's where you either repeat your old patterns or create new ones. Most people don't even know the pause exists. Everything feels instant. Someone disrespects you and you fire back. Someone disagrees with you and you defend. Someone challenges you and you escalate. But if you slow it down, even for just a couple of seconds, you will notice there is always a space between stimulus and response. That space is where control lives. The pause is not about being passive. It's about buying time for the intelligent part of you to show up before the emotional part takes over. Emotion is fast. Ego is fast. Impulse is fast. Wisdom needs a moment, and that moment is almost always within reach. What you are learning here is not how to feel less. It's how to interrupt your automatic reaction long enough to choose a better one. That's what the pause gives you: choice. Even 1 second of pause can change the outcome of a situation. 1 second to breathe. 1 second to review. 1 second to ask yourself, what am I about to do? That may sound small, but most people never get that second. They go straight from trigger to reaction. Straight from emotion to expression, straight from discomfort to relief. And those fast reactions are the reason they stay stuck in unnecessary conflict, unnecessary explanations and unnecessary regret. When you build the pause, you slow down the impulse long enough to consider consequences. You ask better questions. Does this reaction serve me? Is this worth the energy? Who benefits if I respond this way? How will I feel about this tomorrow? Those questions don't ignore your emotion. They regulate it. They don't kill your pride. They protect it from foolish moves. They don't make you weak. They keep you from bleeding strength in the wrong direction. If you watch genuinely powerful people, they rarely react instantly. They listen. They observe. They process. They take their time. Sometimes they even stay silent. And because of that, their words carry more weight when they finally choose to speak. Their silence isn't confusion, it's preparation. Their pause isn't hesitation, it's control. This is why composure is often mistaken for superiority. People assume that if you're not reacting emotionally, you either don't care or you are unaffected. But the truth is, you care enough to respond wisely instead of impulsively. Now, the pause is a muscle. You can build it, you're not born with it. And you don't have to get it perfect from the start. Like any muscle, it gets stronger through repetition. You practice in small moments first, when someone cuts you off in traffic, when a friend says something irritating, when you receive criticism at work, when a stranger is rude, when your ego is poked. These small moments become training sessions. And you'll notice something interesting. When you don't react, the world doesn't end. There's no explosion, there's no collapse. In fact, you often feel stronger for not taking the bait. There is a saying worth remembering. If you can control the first 5 seconds, you can control the outcome. Because most battles aren't won in the argument. They're won in the beginning of the argument. Most conflicts aren't determined by logic. They're determined by reaction speed. The faster the reaction, the less intelligence involved. The slower the reaction, the more control you gain. The pause also protects you from saying things you don't mean. Words spoken in reaction are often words that become permanent wounds. Relationships are damaged not by thoughtful disagreement, but by unfiltered emotion. Careers are ruined, not by failure, but by reactive behavior under pressure. Opportunities are lost, not by incompetence, but by lack of composure at critical moments. The pause prevents you from turning temporary feelings into permanent outcomes. Some people fear the pause because they associate speed with strength. But strength is not about speed. Strength is about direction. A fast reaction going the wrong way creates damage. A slower reaction going the right way creates advantage. And advantage is far more valuable than momentary emotional satisfaction. As you master the pause, you will also notice something subtle. Life becomes less chaotic. You stop feeling like everything demands your immediate attention. You stop feeling like you must defend yourself at every moment. You stop feeling controlled by what others say or do. The pause becomes your filter. It lets you decide what deserves a response and what doesn't. It lets you choose battles instead of being dragged into them. And eventually it becomes part of your identity. The old version of you reacted first and thought later. The new version thinks first and reacts only when necessary. That transformation doesn't happen overnight, but it happens faster than you think when you start practicing intentionally. The pause is small, but it leads to big changes. It gives you power, and the silent kind of power is the kind that lasts. Chapter 4. Refuse the bait that triggers you. Every environment has bait. In conversations, in conflicts, in workplaces, in relationships, and especially online. Bait is anything designed to pull you into reacting emotionally, defensively, or impulsively. It may look like an insult, a provocative comment, a disrespectful tone, a subtle jab, a challenge to your competence, or even a compliment laced with competition. The purpose of bait is simple: to make you react. Because once you react, you lose control. And once you lose control, someone else takes the lead in the interaction. You have to understand something fundamental. Not every provocation deserves a reaction. Sometimes the bait is obvious. Someone speaks to you rudely, or tries to embarrass you in front of others. Other times it's subtle. like someone questioning your ability or making you feel like you need to prove your worth. But the moment you grab the bait, you enter their frame, you start speaking their language, you fight their battle, not yours. That is how power shifts silently, without anyone announcing it. People take bait for one main reason. The ego hates being challenged. When you feel misunderstood, dismissed, or disrespected, a part of you wants to defend, explain, or correct. It wants justice right now. It wants validation right now. It wants to restore image right now. But reacting is rarely the way to get any of those. In fact, reacting usually gives the other person exactly what they wanted from the beginning: access to your emotional system. If you look at real power dynamics, the strong rarely take the bait, not because they are afraid, but because they are strategic. They understand that reacting is often what the other side wants. If someone can drag you out of character, they win. If they can make you emotional, they win. If they can make you lose your composure, they win. And they win without lifting anything heavy, just by triggering you. There is a quote that fits perfectly here. When you argue with fools, you become one. The moment you take the bait, you enter a space where the best outcome is zero, and the worst outcome is damage. You gain nothing by proving yourself to someone who set the trap. If they cared about truth, there would be no bait. If they cared about understanding, there would be no provocation. Bait is not about resolution, it's about reaction. This is why restraint is a power move. When you refuse to take the bait, something interesting happens. The person who tried to pull you in now has to sit with their own energy. Their tension has nowhere to go. Their escalation finds no opponent. Their attempt at manipulation falls flat, and more often than not, it becomes obvious to everyone watching who holds the higher position. Refusing the bait doesn't mean you let people disrespect you. It means you don't defend your ego at the cost of your dignity. You don't react just because someone provoked your pride. You don't fight because someone is inviting you to fight. You wait, you evaluate. You decide whether engagement benefits you or not, and most of the time, it won't. Consider how much pain, drama, and wasted time occurs because someone took the bait. Arguments that last days, feuds that last months, resentment that lasts years, all because of a moment of provocation, all because someone couldn't walk away, all because someone thought reacting was a form of strength. Strength is not proven during the provocation. Strength is proven during the restraint. Anyone can react. Anyone can throw words, escalate conflict, or defend themselves aggressively. That's easy. What's difficult is staying composed when everything inside you wants to fire back. What's difficult is asking, who benefits if I respond right now, and realizing the answer is not you. Refusing the bait also protects your reputation. People form opinions about others, not just from how they speak but from how they respond under stress. If you are easily triggered, you will be seen as emotionally light. If you are easily provoked, you will be seen as reactive and predictable. But if you show restraint, if you refuse to be pulled into unnecessary battles, if you respond only when it matters, you build quiet authority. And quiet authority is one of the strongest forms of social influence. Eventually, refusing the bait becomes a kind of filter. It keeps you out of petty conflicts. It keeps you out of low-level conversations. It keeps you out of situations that do not serve your goals. The world is full of noise and invitations to waste your energy. You do not have unlimited energy to waste. Choosing not to react is how you conserve it for things that matter. The old version of you might have taken every bait, defending, arguing, proving, correcting, reacting to every spark. The new version of you chooses silence when appropriate, strategy when necessary, and engagement only when it serves your long-term direction. That is how you stop being controlled by external triggers. That is how you take ownership of your reactions. That is how you begin moving from emotional survival to emotional leadership. Chapter 5. Rewrite the story in your mind. Every reaction is born from a story, not the story of what happened, but the story you tell yourself about what happened. Two people can experience the exact same situation and react in completely opposite ways, not because the event was different, but because the meaning they assigned to it was different. Meaning drives emotion, and emotion drives reaction. If you want to change the way you react, you must change the story you attach to the moment. Imagine someone interrupts you while you're speaking. One person might think, they don't respect me, and feel anger. Another might think, they're excited and didn't realize, and feel nothing. Same event, different story, different reaction. When you learn to rewrite the internal story, you gain leverage over your emotional system. You become less sensitive to triggers, less controlled by ego, and less dominated by assumptions that create unnecessary conflict. The problem is that most stories are not chosen, they are automatic. They come from past experiences, insecurities, fears, biases, and unfinished emotional business. If you grew up in an environment where criticism felt like an attack, you might interpret neutral feedback as hostility. If you grew up needing validation, you might interpret silence as rejection. If you grew up around conflict, you might assume disagreement equals disrespect. None of these are universal truths, they are personal stories. And until you update them, they will continue directing your reactions without your consent. To rewrite the story, you must first become aware of it. When something triggers you, pause and ask, what story am I telling myself right now? That question creates distance. It gives you enough space to observe your mind instead of being pulled into it. Sometimes you'll notice the story is exaggerated, distorted, or overly dramatic. Other times you'll notice the story is rooted in fear or insecurity rather than reality. And occasionally you'll notice there is no evidence for the story at all. It's just habit. Here's where the power grows. Once you identify the story, you can replace it with a better one. Not a delusional one, not a weak one, a better one. Instead of "they did that to disrespect me," you might try, "maybe they're having a bad day." Instead of "they're ignoring me," you might try, "people are busy, not everything is about me." Instead of "I failed, I'm not good enough," you might try, "failure is feedback, and I'll adjust." None of these replacements are passive or submissive. They are rational, grounded, and strategic. They give you stability instead of chaos. The biggest trap is assuming your story is the truth. It's not. It's just one interpretation. Until you learn to question it, it becomes a prison, and that prison keeps you reactive, defensive, and emotionally fragile. People who cannot rewrite their stories become victims of their own perception. They believe every thought they think and every feeling they feel. But your thoughts are not always accurate, and your feelings are not always wise. You need both, awareness and control, to build maturity. This matters because your story doesn't just influence how you react, it influences who you become. If your story says the world is against you, you will become defensive. If your story says people are judging you, you will become insecure. If your story says everything is personal, you will live on edge. But if your story says obstacles make you stronger, criticism helps you grow, and disrespect doesn't define you, then you become resilient. Same world, new identity. Rewriting the story also protects relationships. Much of the conflict in life doesn't come from what happened, it comes from the interpretation of what happened. One misunderstanding can create a war, one assumption can end a friendship, one inaccurate story can damage trust for years. People rarely fight over facts, they fight over meanings. And if you refuse to examine the meanings you assign, You will spend your life reacting to things that might not even be real. This skill is also essential for confidence. Confidence is not the absence of doubt. It's the ability to reinterpret situations in a way that keeps you moving forward. When confident people fail, their story is, "I'll learn from this." When insecure people fail, their story is, "This proves I'm not capable." That difference in storytelling creates a difference in behavior, and that difference in behavior creates a difference in results. Eventually, rewriting the story becomes second nature. You stop assuming. You stop personalizing everything. You stop reacting to shadows. You start thinking in possibilities instead of threats. And people will notice. They'll see you remain calm when others panic. They'll see you respond with intelligence when others react with emotion. They'll see that you don't give your power to every situation or every person. That is the beginning of becoming unrecognizable, not because life becomes easier, but because your internal dialogue becomes stronger. The old version of you interpreted everything through insecurity. The new version interprets through clarity, and clarity produces control, control of thought, control of emotion, and control of reaction. That control will change how you move, how you speak, and eventually how you live. Chapter 6. Upgrade: How you present yourself to the world. The way you present yourself to the world strongly influences how the world responds to you. This includes your voice, your posture, your decisions, your reactions, and even the energy you bring into a room. People are constantly reading signals, consciously and unconsciously. They read strength, insecurity, confidence, hesitation, threat, composure, and capability, long before they hear your words. And whether you realize it or not, those signals help determine the opportunities you receive, the treatment you get, and the respect you command. You've probably experienced this yourself. Some individuals walk into a room and immediately set the tone without saying a word. Others enter quietly and instantly shrink into the background. What makes the difference? Presentation, not in the superficial sense of fashion or charisma, but in the deeper sense of identity, posture, and self-respect. When you control the way you present yourself, you influence how others interact with you. When you lose control of that presentation, you leave your identity up to interpretation, and people rarely interpret in your favor. One of the fastest ways to upgrade your presentation is by controlling your reactions. Emotional volatility signals unpredictability. Unpredictability signals instability. Instability makes people cautious. When you are easily triggered or easily flustered, the world knows exactly how to manipulate you. The more predictable your reactions are, the easier you are to control. But when you become the kind of person who responds with composure, even under stress, your presence changes. Your silence becomes strategic. Your restraint becomes impressive. Your steadiness becomes influence. There is an important distinction here. Presenting strength does not mean acting tough. It means acting aligned. Toughness is noisy. Strength is quiet. Toughness is reactive. Strength is selective. Toughness tries to impress. Strength doesn't need to. The person who tries to look powerful is often insecure. The person who actually is powerful doesn't need to announce it. Power is felt through control, and the greatest display of control is how you handle your reactions when things don't go your way. Another aspect of presentation comes from how you speak, not just the words you choose, but the timing, the tone, the clarity, and the intention behind them. Words spoken in frustration are rarely persuasive. Words spoken to impress are rarely respected. Words spoken without pause are rarely listened to. But words spoken with composure and precision create impact. The listener feels that you mean what you say. They feel that you are not begging for agreement. They feel you have your own center. Body language plays a role as well. not in the gimmicky sense of power poses, but in the foundational sense of how you carry yourself. Do you slouch or do you stand with presence? Do you rush or do you move with intention? Do you occupy space or do you try to disappear? These are not small details. They shape perception. People treat you according to how you treat yourself. If you present yourself as someone who requires permission, the world will ask you to prove yourself. If you present yourself as someone who knows their value, the world adjusts to accommodate it. Your identity also develops through consistency. When you are consistent, people trust you. When you are erratic, people watch you. Trust creates opportunity. Watching creates hesitation. Upgrading your presentation means becoming someone others know how to engage with, someone whose reactions are stable, whose word is reliable, and whose decisions are not ruled by impulse. In the long run, that reputation becomes a strategic advantage. People prefer to partner with, promote, invest in, and bet on individuals who maintain composure under pressure. An overlooked part of presentation is the energy you bring into situations. Some people bring urgency, anxiety, or insecurity wherever they go. Others bring confidence, patience, and clarity. Energy is communication without words. Energy creates atmosphere, and atmosphere influences decision-making. If your presence puts others at ease, they are more willing to listen. If your presence adds tension, they prepare to defend. Your reactions are one of the strongest contributors to the energy you project. The more control you have internally, the more stability you radiate externally. Upgrading how you present yourself is not about pretending to be someone else. It is about revealing a more disciplined and refined version of who you already are. It is the process of removing unnecessary behaviors that weaken your influence and replacing them with behaviors that strengthen it. The people you admire for their presence were not born with it. They built it. They built it by learning to control their reactions, regulate their emotions, and carry themselves with purpose. Eventually, as your presentation evolves, the world begins treating you differently. People interrupt you less. They challenge you less. They provoke you less. They respect your time more. They consider your words more carefully, and they approach you with a different tone, not because you demanded respect, but because you projected someone who doesn't respond to disrespect impulsively. The old version of you reacted to everything. The upgraded version reacts to only what matters, and that alone changes how you move through the world, and how the world moves around you. Chapter 7. Choose logic. When impulse shows up, when something catches you off guard, your first reaction is rarely the wisest one. The first reaction is emotional. It's fast, charged, and often based on incomplete information. Impulse is built for survival, not for strategy. It wants immediate resolution, immediate clarity, immediate victory, or immediate escape. But life doesn't reward immediacy. Life rewards alignment, and alignment comes from choosing logic over impulse, especially in moments when emotions demand the steering wheel. Impulse says, react now. Logic says, think first. Impulse says, protect your pride. Logic says, protect your future. Impulse says, make them feel what you feel. Logic says, do what benefits you long term. Notice the difference. One is loud, one is quiet, one is impatient, one is steady. One wants relief, one wants results. And the version of you that becomes unrecognizable is the one that chooses results over relief. Most people assume they are logical because they think, I know what's going on. But knowing is not the same as choosing. You can know what is wise and still react impulsively. You can know what is right and still do what feels good in the moment. Logic doesn't merely exist in your mind. It has to win the battle against your emotions when the moment tests you. That battle is where maturity is built. That battle is where strength is proven. Impulse has three major motivations: ego, fear, and insecurity. Ego reacts to protect status. Fear reacts to protect safety. Insecurity reacts to protect image. None of these are wrong, they are just incomplete. They cannot see far ahead. They cannot consider future consequences. They cannot calculate impact. Logic, on the other hand, sees the whole board. It asks questions like, if I react this way, what happens next? What does this cost me? Is this a good trade? The person who learns to think in trades, to evaluate reaction as an investment, becomes extremely powerful. Reactive people lose because they trade long-term respect for short-term emotional comfort. They trade reputation for release. They trade control for expression. But resilient, strategic individuals do the opposite. They trade short-term emotional comfort for long-term respect. They trade expression for influence. They trade reaction for leverage. That is what choosing logic looks like in practice. To choose logic, you must first recognize when impulse is entering the room. You'll notice it in your body before you notice it in your mind. Your chest tightens, your breathing changes, your tone sharpens, your thoughts speed up, your patience shortens. The urge to respond rises. These are signs, not signs that you must react, signs that you must pause. The moment you feel that shift, logic is available. You just have to reach for it before impulse takes action on your behalf. This is why training awareness is essential. You cannot choose logic if you are unaware of when you're being hijacked by emotion. You must learn to catch yourself mid-trigger. Not an hour later, not after the argument, not after the regret, in the moment. That's the skill, that's the training, that's the work. And the more you practice, the faster you become at noticing the emotional surge and halting it before it becomes a behavior. Once you notice impulse, the next step is evaluation. Ask yourself, what outcome do I want here? This is a powerful question because it forces your mind to shift from emotional defense to strategic thinking. The moment you think in outcomes, you stop reacting to the moment and start responding to the mission. And missions always outperform moments. A person who lives for the moment burns bridges. A person who lives for the mission builds pathways. Choosing logic does not mean becoming cold or robotic. Emotion can still have a seat at the table. It just can't run the meeting. Emotion brings passion, connection, meaning, and drive. Logic brings direction, structure, clarity, and timing. When both work together, you become sharp, deliberate, and significantly harder to manipulate. When emotion runs unchecked, you become predictable and easy to control. One of the best ways to strengthen logic is to study consequences. Look back at your past reactions and ask, did reacting quickly serve me or sabotage me? You'll find that many regrets could have been avoided with just a little more space, a little more thought, or a little more patience. Your past is a teacher, and it teaches you not through punishment, but through patterns. When you see the patterns clearly, you stop repeating them. Eventually, something interesting happens. The more you choose logic, the less chaos enters your life. People stop trying to bait you because it doesn't work anymore. Conflicts de-escalate before they start. Opportunities come to you because you are seen as stable and dependable, and most importantly, you begin trusting yourself. Not just emotionally, but strategically. That trust becomes the foundation of the unrecognizable version of you. The old version reacted to protect pride. The new version responds to protect purpose. And that difference will reshape everything: how you think, how you interact, and how you build your life from this point forward. Chapter 8. Stay calm. When conflict invites chaos. Conflict is where emotional discipline is tested the most. Anyone can remain composed when nothing is at stake. Anyone can look balanced when the environment is peaceful. But conflict introduces pressure, and pressure invites chaos. Chaos in the form of raised voices, rapid assumptions, sharp words, wounded egos, and heightened emotions. And what do most people do when conflict arrives? They match the chaos. They mirror it. Someone gets louder, so they get louder. Someone gets more aggressive, so they get more aggressive. Someone gets more emotional, so they abandon logic entirely. And in that reaction, they lose control over themselves and the situation. Staying calm in conflict is not about being passive or weak. It's about refusing to surrender your power. Calm people are not calm because they feel nothing. They are calm because they refuse to escalate. They refuse to let someone else hijack their emotional system. They refuse to hand over their composure to the loudest voice in the room. And once you understand this, you begin to notice something important. The calmest person in conflict almost always ends up with the advantage. Here's why. Conflict is not just about the surface argument. Conflict is about leverage. It's about position. It's about who is leading the interaction and who is reacting to it. When you escalate emotionally, you surrender the lead. You stop thinking about outcomes and start thinking about defending yourself. You stop thinking about the situation and start thinking about your pride. And pride is a terrible strategist. It reacts, it protects, it attacks, but it rarely wins you anything worthwhile. When you stay calm, you keep sight of the bigger picture. You can assess what the conflict is actually about. Is it about truth? Is it about misunderstanding? Is it about ego? Is it about control? Is it about fear? Is it about identity? Most conflicts are not about the thing being argued. They are about the emotions surrounding the thing. If you respond only to the surface layer, you miss the real game. There is also a psychological shift that occurs when someone remains composed during conflict. It forces the other person to confront their own escalation. A raised voice sounds louder next to a calm one. Aggression looks more irrational next to composure. Chaos looks less justifiable next to reason. Calmness becomes a mirror. It exposes the emotional volatility of the other side. And most people, deep down, do not want to be seen as irrational. Another powerful element of staying calm is clarity. When emotions spike, clarity disappears. You stop listening. You stop processing. You stop understanding. Everything becomes about the win, and the win becomes corrosive. Even if you technically win the argument, you lose respect, connection, or trust in the process. A destructive win is not a win. It's just a disguised loss with better marketing. Calmness allows you to choose a win that actually serves you and preserves what matters. Now let's address something important. Staying calm does not mean staying silent. Silence can be a tool, but calmness is a state. Calmness means you speak with clarity instead of frustration. It means you take pauses instead of interruptions. It means you ask questions instead of making accusations. It means you seek understanding instead of dominance. And here's the irony. The person seeking understanding often gains influence more quickly than the person seeking victory. To remain calm in conflict, you must learn to regulate your own internal triggers. A fight is rarely about just the fight. It often touches wounds that existed long before the conversation. If criticism triggers you, it might not be the criticism that's painful, but the fear of not being good enough. If disagreement triggers you, it might not be the disagreement that's painful, but the fear of being dismissed or unseen. If disrespect triggers you, it might not be the disrespect itself, but the fear of losing status. When you detach the conflict from your identity, the conflict becomes easier to handle. Another strategy is to slow the pace. Conflict accelerates quickly. Voices get faster, hearts beat faster, thoughts rush. When you slow the pace, by slowing your speech, by asking clarifying questions, by taking intentional pauses, You break the rhythm of escalation. Escalation needs momentum. If you interrupt the momentum, escalation weakens. This is how negotiators, leaders and mediators gain control in heated environments. Finally, staying calm creates outcomes that impulsive people never access. Relationships are preserved. Decisions are made with intelligence instead of emotion. Opportunities remain open instead of being burned by pride. You walk away with self-respect instead of regret. And perhaps most importantly, you show yourself that you are no longer controlled by chaos. The old version of you entered conflict ready to win arguments. The new version enters conflict ready to win outcomes. That shift makes all the difference, and it is one of the clearest signs that you are becoming unrecognizable to the person you used to be. Chapter 9. Don't waste your energy on every noise. One of the most exhausting ways to live is to respond to everything. Every comment, every opinion, every piece of gossip, every provocation, every piece of news, every slight inconvenience, all of it can consume you if you don't learn to filter. Life is loud, people are loud, the world is full of noise, disguised as importance. And if you don't develop the discipline to ignore the noise, you will burn your energy on things that produce nothing in return. Noise is anything that demands a reaction without offering a result. Think about how often people fall into this trap. They react to the opinions of strangers online. They react to the moods of coworkers. They react to the behavior of drivers on the road. They react to relatives who love drama. They react to friends who love chaos. They react to people who crave attention more than truth. And every one of those reactions costs energy. Energy that could have been invested in building a better life, improving skills, strengthening relationships, or simply enjoying peace. You must understand, energy is currency. Where you spend it determines your returns. If you spend it on noise, you get nothing. If you spend it on growth, you get leverage. If you spend it on drama, you get fatigue. If you spend it on discipline, you get results. Strong people are not strong because they fight more battles. They are strong because they choose fewer battles, and the right ones. Filtering noise begins with recognizing that not everything deserves your attention. Attention is one of the most valuable forms of power you possess. Whatever you give attention to grows in your life. If you give attention to problems, problems grow. If you give attention to goals, goals grow. Noise wants attention, and the moment you hand it over, noise becomes influence. But influence without intention is dangerous. It makes you reactive, not strategic. Social environments thrive on noise. Some people communicate not to connect, but to provoke. Some criticize not to help, but to feel superior. Some gossip not to inform, but to distract. And if you don't notice these patterns, you will find yourself pulled into battles that don't belong to you. Someone else's negativity becomes your stress. Someone else's insecurity becomes your argument. Someone else's drama becomes your weekend. Meanwhile, your goals sit untouched, your energy drains, and your mind becomes cluttered with problems that were never yours to solve. There is a mental shift that changes everything. Not every situation is yours to fix. Not every statement is yours to answer. Not every provocation is yours to address. And not every emotion is yours to match. When you learn to let things pass through your mind without hooking into them, you become extremely difficult to disturb. That is not detachment in the cold sense. It is detachment in the mature sense. Detachment as a strategy. Detachment as a filter. Detachment as protection. To avoid wasting energy on noise, you must develop criteria for engagement. Ask yourself simple questions. Does this matter? Does this serve me? Will this matter in a month? Will this matter in a year? Does responding benefit me, or just soothe my ego? Most of the time your ego wants to react, but your growth wants to ignore. The ego wants to be right. Growth wants to be effective. The ego wants attention. growth wants direction. A powerful example of this is silence. Silence is not weakness. Silence can be a shield, a strategy, and a test. Silence forces others to reveal the depth or shallowness of their intentions. If the noise is superficial, it dies without your participation. If the noise has substance, it persists with clarity. Silence teaches you who deserves your energy. People who seek understanding will ask. People who seek drama will escalate. Silence exposes motivations. Another key component is emotional conservation. You have limited emotional capacity. You cannot invest in everything. If you waste emotional resources on noise, you lose the ability to invest in the things that matter: relationships, ambitions, skills, purpose, health. Many people don't lack motivation. They lack available emotional bandwidth because they've spent it all on things that produced nothing. They were busy, but not productive, exhausted, but not fulfilled. The world rewards those who know how to allocate energy wisely. High performers, respected leaders, and mentally stable individuals all share this trait. They don't react to everything. They protect their attention. They protect their time. They protect their emotional state. Not out of selfishness, but out of understanding that their resources are limited and valuable. Eventually, when you stop responding to every noise, something profound occurs. Life becomes quieter, not because the world changed, but because you did. You stop hearing invitations to chaos. You stop noticing insults that once offended you. You stop caring about opinions that once controlled you. You stop getting dragged into pointless debates. The noise was always there. You simply stopped tuning into it. The old version of you reacted to noise. The new version listens only to signal. Signal is information that helps you grow, build, learn, or move forward. Noise is everything else. The moment you make that distinction, you stop wasting your power and start reclaiming your life. Chapter 10. Trade short-term comfort for long-term power. One of the core reasons people react impulsively is because impulse promises immediate relief. Relief from discomfort, relief from uncertainty, relief from embarrassment, relief from pressure, and relief feels good in the moment. It soothes the ego. It protects the image. It gives you something right now. But here's the problem. The things that feel good right now often cost you later, and the things that cost you right now often reward you later. This is the trade that separates the easily triggered from the deeply disciplined. Delayed gratification is not just a financial concept. It's not just about saving money or investing. It's about emotional behavior. It's about identity. It's about how you handle stress, temptation, provocation, and desire. When you choose to react quickly, you choose short-term comfort. When you choose to pause, think, and respond deliberately, you choose long-term power. And long-term power always wins. Consider how often people damage their future for the sake of immediate comfort. They lash out in anger and damage relationships. They defend themselves aggressively and damage credibility. They pursue validation instantly and damage their dignity. They argue to win today and lose influence tomorrow. The pattern is everywhere. Comfort now, consequences later. The more mature path flips the equation. Discomfort now, strength later. Emotional maturity is built on this principle. Strong people tolerate emotional discomfort. They tolerate awkward silence. They tolerate delayed validation. They tolerate uncertainty. They tolerate being misunderstood temporarily, because they understand that short-term discomfort buys long-term respect. Weak people demand comfort now. They demand explanations now. They demand validation now. And in that demand, they lose leverage. A powerful example of this is the urge to react defensively. When someone criticizes you, the instinct is to explain yourself, to defend, to correct, to justify. Why? Because being misunderstood feels uncomfortable. But mature people can sit inside that discomfort. They understand that not every critic deserves clarification, and not every situation benefits from immediate defense. Sometimes the strategic move is to let misunderstandings resolve themselves over time. Sometimes the best response is improvement, not explanation. Sometimes the results you produce later will erase the doubts people have today far more powerfully than any speech could. Another form of short-term comfort is avoiding decisions. People procrastinate not because they are lazy, but because deciding creates discomfort. Deciding means committing. Committing means risking failure. Avoiding decisions feels good temporarily. No judgment, no failure, no responsibility. But long-term indecision is one of the fastest ways to lose power. Powerful people make decisions. They accept the discomfort of uncertainty now to gain direction later. Delayed gratification also applies to communication. When conflict arises, people often rush to resolve things immediately because tension feels uncomfortable. But not every conflict should be resolved in the moment you feel it. Sometimes people need time to cool. Sometimes information needs to settle. Sometimes clarity arrives only after silence. When you force resolution because you can't tolerate emotional tension, you solve nothing. You just soothe your feelings. Then there is the trap of instant pleasure. Food cravings, impulsive purchases, distractions, social media, validation seeking. All of these offer comfort with no long-term benefit. They are easy to indulge in because the rewards are immediate. But the more you indulge in immediate pleasure, the less you build capacity for long-term power. Pleasure chases feelings. Power chases direction. You become dangerous when you can delay gratification. When you can say, I don't need to feel good right now, I am building something bigger. That mindset is rare. That mindset is why the world looks up to disciplined people, even if they mock them at first. Discipline is respected. Instant gratification is common, and what is common rarely commands admiration. To master this chapter, you need to ask a new question. When impulse shows up, what does this cost me long term? Not just emotionally, but in identity. Every reaction you choose is a vote for the person you are becoming. React in anger, and you vote for anger. React in insecurity, and you vote for insecurity. React in wisdom, and you vote for wisdom. The compounding effect of those votes shapes your character. You also need to recognize that delayed gratification is not deprivation, it is investment. When you delay the reaction, you invest in a better response. When you delay the validation, you invest in self-respect. When you delay the pleasure, you invest in long-term fulfillment. When you delay the argument, you invest in peace. Investment is uncomfortable at the beginning and rewarding at the end. Pleasure is the opposite, rewarding at the beginning and costly at the end. Eventually, as you trade short-term comfort for long-term power, you will notice something profound. Your world begins to organize itself around your discipline. Opportunities open that were previously closed. People treat you differently because you treat yourself differently. Chaos loses its grip on you because it can no longer bait you. The version of you that once chased relief now chases mastery. And that version is exactly the one that becomes unrecognizable, not because life got easier, but because you stopped choosing comfort over growth. Chapter 11. Starve the drama that drains your focus. Drama is one of the biggest thieves of human potential. It steals time. It steals attention. It steals emotional bandwidth. And worst of all, it steals focus. People often underestimate how costly drama truly is because most drama feels justified in the moment. It feels like something you must address, something you must correct, something you must respond to, something you must fix. But when the dust settles, you realize it produced nothing, no growth, no progress, no improvement, no elevation, just fatigue. Where there is drama, there is always a reaction waiting to happen. And that is precisely why drama exists. It feeds on reaction. Without reaction, drama dies. Without attention, drama evaporates. Drama requires participation, and the moment you understand that drama is a demand for your emotional participation, you gain the power to starve it. You begin to understand that saying nothing is sometimes stronger than saying everything. You begin to understand that letting a situation pass through you without hooking into it is a skill, not a weakness. Drama often starts with small provocations, a sarcastic comment, a backhanded compliment, a subtle jab, a bit of gossip, an unnecessary comparison, a disagreement that could have been a conversation but becomes a conflict because ego got involved. These micro-dramas happen every day, and most people take the bait without noticing. Before they know it, they're invested in an argument that serves no purpose, defending a position that doesn't matter, or fighting for validation from people who don't care. Drama thrives in environments where ego is fragile and attention is cheap. It thrives where people need to be right more than they need to be effective. It thrives where people seek validation more than results. The fastest way to kill drama is to remove its audience. If you don't engage, you don't fuel it. If you don't explain, you don't feed it. If you don't defend, you don't expand it. Most drama escalates because both sides keep throwing firewood. One person throws a spark, the other throws gasoline. Before long, it turns into a fire neither side intended. To starve drama, you must develop emotional discipline. Emotional discipline doesn't mean you avoid conflict. It means you address conflict without chaos. It means you resolve issues without performing. It means you communicate without competing. It means you choose clarity over theatrics. Drama is theatrical, maturity is quiet. Drama wants an audience. Maturity wants a resolution. Drama seeks escalation. Maturity seeks understanding. Another source of drama is gossip. Gossip is drama, transferred through conversation. It spreads fear, doubt, insecurity, and tension. Gossip exists because it gives people a sense of involvement without responsibility. It offers entertainment without meaning. But the cost of gossip isn't paid in the moment. It's paid later in distrust, fractured relationships, and emotional contamination. When you participate in gossip, even passively, you carry other people's problems into your mental space. And once they're inside, they sit there, draining focus that could have been used for something real. Drama also arises from over-explanation. When you feel the need to explain yourself to everyone, you open doors to endless debates. Not everyone needs access to your reasoning. Not everyone deserves access to your intentions. Explanations should be reserved for those who are affected by your decisions, not those who are merely curious or judgmental. When you stop over-explaining, you shrink the battlefield, and many dramatic fires go out, because there is no oxygen left to keep them burning. There is also drama that comes from overreacting to small inconveniences. Someone is late, someone forgets something, someone doesn't respond when you expected, someone disagrees with your idea. These are minor events that can become dramatic if your emotional response inflates them. When you treat small things as big things, you train your nervous system to live in chaos. The strongest people don't make small things bigger, they make big things smaller. They break problems down. They de-escalate instead of escalate. And in doing so they preserve peace. Here's the bigger picture. Drama steals from your goals. It steals from your creativity, your discipline, your relationships, and your mental clarity. People who are constantly involved in drama rarely make meaningful progress, because progress requires sustained focus. When your attention is constantly bouncing between emotional fires, you never have enough fuel for long-term work. Drama makes you reactive. Greatness requires you to be proactive. The moment you begin starving drama, your life starts changing. Conversations get shorter. Relationships become healthier. Boundaries become clearer. Your mind becomes quieter. People who thrive on chaos either adjust or drift away. And your time, which was once spent managing other people's emotions, becomes available for building your own life. This is not selfishness, it is sovereignty. The old version of you reacted to every spark. The new version lets sparks burn out on their own. That doesn't just protect your peace, it builds power. The less you feed drama, the more energy you have for growth. And that energy is exactly what separates the distracted from the focused, the reactive from the intentional, and the ordinary from the unrecognizable. Chapter 12. Stop begging for opinions and validation. One of the most subtle forms of emotional slavery is the need for validation. It is quiet, often invisible, and socially acceptable. People rarely admit it, but much of their stress, frustration, and insecurity comes from seeking approval, from wanting others to confirm that they are good enough, talented enough, worthy enough, intelligent enough, successful enough. And because validation often feels good, many don't recognize it as a trap, but it is. The moment you require someone else's approval to feel secure, you hand them control over your reactions. Validation is addictive because it solves a temporary discomfort, uncertainty. When you are unsure about your decisions, you ask others what they think. When you feel insecure about your appearance, you look for compliments. When you doubt your abilities, you seek reassurance. When you aren't sure if your work is valuable, you chase likes, comments, and applause. And like any quick fix, validation feels satisfying at first, but the more you rely on it, the weaker you become without it. This constant need for external confirmation drains both confidence and independence. If you need someone to tell you you're doing well, then someone else can tell you you're not. If you need someone to tell you you're enough, then someone else can tell you you're not. Validation opens the door in both directions. When you let praise define you, you automatically let criticism destroy you, and that is not power, that is dependency. There is also a deeper psychological problem with seeking validation. It makes you perform instead of live. Instead of doing things because they matter to you, you do them because they look good to others. Instead of building the life you want, you build the life you believe people will approve of. And nothing drains authenticity faster than performance. The more you perform, the further you drift from who you actually are. To break the validation trap, you must develop a different orientation: internal referencing. Internal referencing means you evaluate your choices through your own values, your own goals, and your own principles, not someone else's reactions. Internal referencing asks, is this aligned with who I want to be, instead of will people like this? When internal referencing becomes your compass, you stop begging for opinions and start owning your direction. There is a major difference between seeking information and seeking validation. Information helps you improve. Validation helps you feel accepted. Information has a purpose. Validation has a craving. You can consult experts for information. But validation often comes from anyone willing to give attention. That is why validation can make you easy to manipulate. Anyone who knows how much you crave approval can control your mood with a single comment. Another side effect of validation seeking is hesitation. When you need someone else's approval, before you move slowly, you overthink, you wait, you delay, you ask around. And while you are waiting for others to give you permission, someone else with no need for approval takes action and gets the results you wanted. Many people are not lacking talent or intelligence. They are simply waiting for someone to clap before they start performing. Validation is also tied to fear. Fear of disapproval, fear of judgment, fear of being misunderstood, fear of disappointing others. But here's the truth: you will be judged no matter what. You will disappoint someone no matter what. You will be misunderstood at some point, no matter what. There is no version of life where everyone approves of you. Even the most admirable people have critics. Even the most successful people have doubters. Even the kindest people have detractors. If you're waiting for universal approval before you move, you are waiting for a reality that doesn't exist. To stop begging for validation, you need to build self-respect. Self-respect doesn't come from compliments. It comes from decisions. It comes from doing what you said you would do. It comes from taking responsibility for your choices. It comes from moving toward goals even when no one is watching. The more you respect yourself, the less you need others to confirm your worth. External validation becomes a bonus, not a requirement. You also need to learn to live with disapproval. The ability to be disliked when necessary is a form of emotional strength. If you always need to be liked, you will never make strong decisions, because strong decisions often upset someone. People who achieve meaningful things disturb comfort. They challenge assumptions. They break patterns. They set boundaries. They walk away from situations that others tolerate. None of these actions are universally approved, but all of them are part of building a life that belongs to you. Eventually, when you stop begging for opinions and validation, something significant changes. You begin to express yourself without permission. You pursue goals without applause. You stand in rooms without shrinking. You stop explaining your decisions to people who are not affected by them. And you stop allowing opinions to dictate your identity. The old version of you asked, "Do they approve?" The new version asks, "Is this right for me?" That shift is where emotional independence begins. And emotional independence is one of the strongest forms of identity you can ever develop, because once you validate yourself, no one else gets to decide who you are. Chapter 13. Respond with strategy, not emotion. One of the most important upgrades you can make in life is shifting from emotional reactions to strategic responses. Emotional reactions are immediate. They are raw. They are based on how you feel in the moment. Strategic responses are deliberate. They are chosen. They are based on what serves you long-term. The difference between the two is the difference between living as a participant of life and living as a creator of life. Strategy requires awareness. Emotion requires only impulse. Emotion asks, "How do I feel right now?" Strategy asks, "What outcome am I trying to create?" That single shift in orientation changes everything. When you start thinking in outcomes instead of emotions, you stop reacting to the moment and start directing the situation. And the person who directs the situation often walks away with the advantage. Responding with strategy doesn't mean suppressing emotion. Emotion is information. Anger tells you a boundary was crossed. Sadness tells you something meaningful was lost. Fear tells you something uncertain lies ahead. Jealousy tells you something matters. Insecurity tells you something needs development. Emotion gives you data. Strategy decides what to do with that data. When people confuse emotion for direction, their reactions become unpredictable, volatile, and often self-sabotaging. Consider conflict. In conflict, reacting emotionally usually escalates the problem. People become defensive, louder, and more invested in being right. But when you approach conflict strategically, you ask different questions. What is this really about? What does the other person need to feel or understand? What outcome would benefit both sides? These questions shift the focus from winning the argument to resolving the situation, and resolution is far more valuable than victory. Strategy also applies to timing. Not every response should happen immediately. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is wait. Wait until emotion settles. Wait until more information arrives. Wait until the other side reveals their intentions. Strategic people understand that timing is a weapon. They don't rush to speak just because there is silence. They don't rush to act just because there is pressure. They don't rush to explain just because someone demands answers. They choose the moment that gives them the highest leverage. Another component of strategic response is choosing the right medium. Not every disagreement should happen over text. Not every important conversation should happen publicly. Not every issue needs an audience. Emotional people choose the fastest medium. Strategic people choose the most effective medium. If clarity matters, they speak. If documentation matters, they write. If relationship matters, they meet. The medium is not random, it serves the mission. There is also discipline in strategic restraint. Sometimes the best move is no move. Not responding can be a response. Silence can be a statement. Withdrawal can be a boundary. Observation can be a strategy. Emotional people often fear silence because silence feels like uncertainty. But strategic people value silence because silence creates space for information to surface. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. It also prevents you from turning temporary feelings into permanent consequences. Strategic response is not about manipulation. It's about intention. It's about asking, what am I trying to build here? What matters most in this situation? What outcome aligns with my future? Emotional reactions are about right now. Strategic responses are about what happens next. Maturity is measured by how far into the future your decisions can see. Some people see only the next 5 seconds. Others see the next 5 years. That difference in horizon explains why some people create progress while others create chaos. Responding strategically also protects your relationships. When you react emotionally, you might say things you don't mean, or escalate something that could have been handled calmly. Emotional damage is often harder to repair than situational damage. A problem can be fixed. Words sometimes cannot be taken back. Strategic responses slow the tempo and allow you to preserve what matters without sacrificing your dignity. Another benefit of strategic response is how it influences perception. People respect those who do not react impulsively. People trust those who stay composed under pressure. People follow those who think clearly when others panic. This isn't about impressing anyone. It's about showing you are not controlled by the environment. That is power, not the loud, chaotic, performative kind. The quiet kind that builds reputation over time. To master strategic responding, start using 3 core questions whenever something triggers you. What outcome do I actually want here? Will reacting emotionally get me that outcome? What response increases my leverage instead of decreasing it? When you start evaluating situations through that lens, something remarkable happens. Life becomes less reactive and more intentional. You stop fighting battles that don't matter. You stop over-explaining. You stop arguing with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop defending yourself against every opinion. You conserve energy for the things that move your life forward. The old version of you reacted emotionally and wondered why things kept getting messy. The new version responds strategically and watches life become more aligned. That shift does not make you cold, it makes you effective. And effectiveness is what builds the kind of life that eventually makes you unrecognizable to the person you used to be. Chapter 14. Turn hard times into an advantage. Everyone wants to stay composed when life is smooth, when the plans are working, when the people around them are agreeable, and when the results match the effort. But composure matters most when things break, when disappointments arrive, when uncertainty appears, and when life throws something at you that you did not choose. Hard times are not just a test of endurance. They are an exam on how well you control your reactions when the pressure is not optional. And the difference between those who crumble and those who grow is not luck but strategy. They turn hard times into an advantage instead of a crisis. Most people react to hard times emotionally. They complain, they panic, they blame, they freeze, they explain away responsibility. They distract themselves so they don't have to confront reality. But emotional reactions to adversity rarely produce useful outcomes. They may soothe the ego temporarily, but they don't change anything. They don't strengthen anything. They don't move anything forward. Hard times are not solved by emotional expression. They are solved by emotional leadership. Turning adversity into advantage starts with one mindset shift. Obstacles are not interruptions. They are information. They reveal where your systems are weak. They reveal where your signals are incomplete. They reveal where your assumptions were unrealistic. They reveal what needs to change. Without adversity, you would never examine those things because comfort hides weaknesses. Problems expose them. And once something is exposed, it can be improved. Think about any story of transformation you admire. It didn't happen during vacation. It didn't happen when everything was going right. It didn't happen when the path was perfectly paved. It happened when something broke, when a plan failed, when a setback appeared. Hard times force reflection. Reflection produces clarity. Clarity produces action. And action produces growth. There is no growth without friction. Friction is the tax of progress. To use adversity to your advantage, you must resist the urge to personalize it. Hard times are not evidence that life is against you, that you're not good enough, or that the world is unfair. Hard times are universal. The only difference is how people interpret them. One person sees adversity as attack, another sees adversity as training, and the person who sees it as training will eventually outgrow the person who sees it as attack. Another component of using adversity to your advantage is learning to slow down your reaction. When something bad happens, your nervous system wants speed. It wants a fast explanation, fast comfort, fast escape. But the first explanation you give yourself is often wrong, and the first solution you try is often emotional, not strategic. When you pause, you create space for better thinking. When you create space for better thinking, you stop reacting to the pain and start responding to the problem. Adversity also reveals character, not to the world first, but to yourself. You learn whether you quit easily. You learn whether you panic under pressure. You learn whether you look for excuses or look for solutions. You learn whether you are driven by comfort or driven by purpose. Most people don't actually know their character until adversity shows up, because character is not built in theory, it is built in conflict. Hard times also demand responsibility. Responsibility does not mean blame. Responsibility means ownership, ownership of the next move. You don't have to be responsible for everything that happens to you, but you are responsible for how you respond to it. And the moment you take responsibility for response, you stop waiting for life to fix itself. You become the one who adjusts, who adapts, who learns, who recalibrates, who gets up again. That is power. Turning adversity into advantage also means extracting value from pain. Pain is information. Pain is feedback. Pain is a message telling you where your evolution is required. Most people try to numb pain or avoid pain, but pain avoided is just pain delayed. When you learn from it, pain becomes fuel. When you ignore it, pain becomes residue. Residue makes you heavy, bitter, and reactive. Fuel makes you stronger, wiser, and more intentional. Another way to leverage adversity is through direction. Hard times force decisions. They force you to choose what matters and what doesn't. They eliminate distractions. They eliminate unnecessary people. They eliminate illusions. Clarity is expensive. You rarely get it for free. Adversity is one of the prices you pay for clarity. Once you have clarity, your reactions become sharper, your priorities become cleaner, and your life becomes more aligned. The truth is, hard times will visit everyone eventually. You don't get to avoid them, but you do get to choose what they produce in you. You can let adversity shrink you or strengthen you. You can let it make you bitter or make you wiser. You can let it break you or rebuild you. Many of the strongest, most composed, and least reactive people you'll ever meet didn't become that way because life was gentle. They became that way because life was not. The old version of you took adversity personally and reacted emotionally. The new version sees adversity as material for growth, for learning, for strategy, for resilience. And that shift is one of the clearest signs of becoming unrecognizable to who you used to be. Chapter 15. Let silence and results announce who you are. There comes a point in your evolution where you no longer need to argue, explain, justify, defend, or chase recognition. You reach a level of internal clarity where your energy shifts from proving to building, from talking to doing, from declaring your worth to demonstrating it. This chapter is about reaching that point where silence becomes your language and results become your introduction. Silence is underrated in a world obsessed with noise. People feel the need to post, announce, defend, and explain themselves constantly. They comment on everything. They respond to everyone. They try to correct every misunderstanding and fight every misrepresentation. But the truth is simple. When you constantly defend your character, you drain the very power that could have built something undeniable. Silence, when used intentionally, is not avoidance. It is discipline. It is self-control. It is a refusal to waste energy on conversations that lead nowhere. When you understand your mission, you stop needing to announce your moves. Announcing brings attention. Attention brings opinions. Opinions bring noise. Noise brings distraction. And distraction pulls you away from the life you're trying to build. The most powerful people in any field are not the ones who talk the loudest. They are the ones who work the longest. They move in silence, not because they're hiding, but because they're focused. They understand that attention is not the goal. Progress is. When you stop reacting to every comment or criticism, something incredible happens. People begin to wonder. They wonder what you're building. They wonder why you're so calm. They wonder what you know that they don't. Unpredictability creates curiosity. Curiosity creates respect. The less you reveal through words, the more you reveal through behavior. And behavior is always more convincing than conversation. This doesn't mean you stay silent when something important needs to be said. It means you choose where your voice is valuable. Your voice shouldn't be wasted explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. It shouldn't be wasted proving your worth to people who have no intention of respecting it. It shouldn't be wasted trying to persuade people who are not even listening. Strategic silence is the understanding that not every battle requires your sword. Some battles collapse on their own when you starve them of your reaction. Results, on the other hand, require no debate. They require no defense. Results speak a language that cannot be twisted by someone else's opinion. When you accomplish something real, the same people who doubted you are forced to acknowledge it. Even if silently, the criticism fades. The gossip dies, the noise disappears. Results rewrite narratives, they shut down arguments. They shift perception without you saying a single word. People may dismiss your goals, but they cannot dismiss your growth. They may question your direction, but they cannot question your destination once you arrive. They may judge your silence, but they cannot judge your progress when it becomes too obvious to ignore. When you let your actions announce your identity, the world has no choice but to adjust how it sees you. This is why maturity often feels like talking less. Not because you have less to say, but because you no longer need validation. You no longer need to win every argument. You no longer need to prove your intelligence, your kindness, your strength, or your intentions. You know who you are, and when you know who you are, external noise loses its power over you. There is another layer to this silence, protects your emotional state. When you don't react immediately, you create a buffer between yourself and the situation. That buffer gives you space to think instead of react. It gives you space to choose dignity over impulse. It gives you space to align your response with your values instead of your feelings. Silence is not empty, it is full of intelligence. Silence also makes your presence stronger. When you speak less, you observe more. You understand more. You see things other people miss because they are too busy talking. Presence grows in the space where noise disappears. People who are comfortable in silence become powerful without performing. They don't compete for attention, they command it naturally. Now pair that silence with results, real tangible results, and you become unstoppable. The world is built for the loud, but it bends for the disciplined. Loud people gather attention. Disciplined people gather respect. Loud people win the moment. Disciplined people win the future. Think of the old version of yourself, the version that reacted quickly, explained endlessly, fought unnecessary battles, tried to win every argument, and constantly sought to be understood. Now think of the version you are becoming, the version that saves energy for meaningful things, that doesn't chase approval, that works quietly, that chooses direction over distraction, and that lets results introduce them. When you reach this level, you no longer say, "I will prove them wrong." You say, "They will see when they see," and that shift is freedom. Freedom from noise, freedom from emotional dependency, freedom from unnecessary reactions. The old you needed attention, the new you needs progress. The old you needed validation, the new you needs mastery. The old you talked, the new you builds, and when you build consistently, silently, intentionally, your results will speak a language the world cannot ignore. That is the moment you become truly unrecognizable. Conclusion. Transformation is not loud, and it's not instant. It doesn't happen in a single moment of clarity or a dramatic breakthrough. It happens quietly, through 1,000 small decisions, decisions about how you react, how you interpret moments, how you manage discomfort, how you choose your battles, and how you discipline your emotions. This audiobook has not been about becoming perfect. It has been about becoming strategic, intentional, and emotionally independent. Because once you master your reactions, you change the trajectory of your life. Think about who you were before you understood these principles. Maybe you took things personally. Maybe you reacted to every comment, every disagreement, every criticism. Maybe you explained yourself too much. Maybe you chased validation. Maybe you fought battles that didn't matter. Maybe you tried to win arguments at the expense of outcomes. Maybe you handed control of your emotional state to the world around you. There's no shame in that. Many people live their entire lives that way. But you are no longer that person, not because life became easier, but because you became harder to knock off center. The real strength in this journey has been learning to pause instead of lash out, to question instead of assume, to respond instead of react, and to let things go instead of letting them break you. Strength has been learning to let silence protect you, and results represent you. Strength has been choosing long-term power over short-term comfort. Strength has been realizing that not every noise deserves your attention, and not every opinion deserves your energy. Strength has been learning to navigate conflict without inviting chaos into your identity. When you control your reactions, you take back something that most people lose without noticing: sovereignty over your emotional world. Without sovereignty, you are carried by circumstances, pulled by egos, triggered by noise, and influenced by environments. With sovereignty, you remain grounded. You remain intentional. You remain composed. Life does not stop being difficult. People do not stop being unpredictable. Challenges do not disappear, but your response becomes stronger than the situation. And once that happens, life begins to bend in your favor. Now imagine what happens when this way of living compounds over time. A single day of restraint might feel small. A single moment of composure might feel insignificant. But months of composure turn into reputation. Years of composure turn into identity. And identity shapes destiny. There is a reason the phrase of this audiobook is about becoming unrecognizable. Because true evolution is not when others notice you changed. It is when you look back and barely recognize the version of yourself who reacted to everything. Becoming unrecognizable is not about arrogance or superiority. It's about outgrowing the patterns that once controlled you. It's about building a version of yourself that your past self would admire. A version of yourself that does not break under pressure, does not crumble under criticism, does not collapse under misunderstanding, and does not lose direction under provocation. A version of yourself who is trusted, respected, stable, disciplined, and capable of leading both themselves and their environment. If there is one message to take with you, it is this: your reactions are not small. They are not trivial. They are not just emotional responses. They are the architecture of your future. Every reaction is a choice, and every choice is a thread that weaves your character, your relationships, your opportunities, and ultimately your destiny. Control your reactions, and you control far more than you realize. This journey does not end here. It continues every day, in conversations, in conflicts, in challenges, in silence, in uncertainty, and in success. Every day you will have the chance to choose reaction or response, impulse or strategy, comfort or power. Choose wisely, choose deliberately. Choose the version of yourself you are becoming, and with time the old you will fade, not forgotten, but surpassed. And the world will meet a person who did not demand recognition, did not beg for approval, and did not announce their transformation. A person whose composure, restraint and results introduced them long before they ever spoke a word. That is how you become unrecognizable.